Okay, hi everybody. Sorry about the wait. So today I have Dr. Sara Dungavell. I might be butchering pronunciation, but we're going to be talking a little bit about mental health, some of the ways that you can do this both professionally through, I guess, the health authority, but also from an Indigenous perspective in some of those ways. So I'm very excited. Sara has been working in the North for a long time. So without further ado, I will introduce you to Sara. Hello there, my dear. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. Sorry, I'm too young to not have realized I had to click enter studio to actually enter. I was just sitting there testing my mic and camera.
Okay, good. I'm glad it was good. How's it going?
It's going well.
Yeah, you're
I'm looking forward to when I get to go back up into the north. Yeah, well, it's very loud inside my house right now. I thought outside would probably be the quietest place.
Yeah, I tried to go outside and then it started raining on me, so I might switch scenes here pretty quick and join you outside. Okay, so I guess we can kind of dive right in. I'll just explain a little bit about I guess some of the work that Sara does. So if you haven't already read kind of the description, Sara's originally from Ontario. I guess I can call you Dr. Am I pronouncing your name right? Dungavell? Or how do I say it?
It's Dungavell. There's no dung in it. There's lots of gay. Dungavell.
Dungavell.
No one can pronounce it right.
Okay. No dung in it. I got it. Okay. So, but now she currently lives in Saskatchewan and has been working in the North for a number of years. And you're a graduate from Brescia University, correct? Which is, your college was an extension of an all-women's college? Okay. Very cool. And then so she did her undergrad in religious studies and community development, and then went into psychiatry. So very cool. I will let Sara kind of introduce herself further.
I don't know what else to say about myself. That was a good introduction. I'm living in Saskatoon now. I'm lucky enough that I get to fly up north about 1 day a week. It's 1 day to La Loche, 1 day to L'Orange, and 2 days to L'Orange and 1 day to Stony Rapids. But I had to stop because of COVID. So now I'm just doing my telehealth appointments from home, which has been interesting because I've got 3 boys. So every once in a while, I'm joining our appointments. It's always time patience. I appreciate everyone's patience.
Your mic is cutting out just a little bit.
Oh, sorry. I've got you as close to my phone as I can.
Perfect.
In the hopes that the internet will work.
Okay, yeah, it's good now. Hopefully you can't hear that boat too loud in my background.
Good. Oh, sorry. The background's I can move to an indoor place that children might swim.
Ooh, the mic is just cutting out.
Shoot. I'm sorry if my internet's not strong enough. It's been being difficult the past week or so, which makes me feel for the kids up north trying to do their school.
Okay, I'll just let you keep going with whatever. So I guess we can just jump right into it. There's so much we have to talk about. I was just getting so excited. And I want to give a shout out to Dr. Dan Irvine, who also works up in L'Orange. He was actually a summer student here. That's where I first met Dan and his wife Elliot. And they were a part of the Links program through the College of Med. They were students here for a summer, and it was years ago. So Dan, thanks for connecting us. Very much appreciated. So I guess just opening up, I wanted to chat a little bit about some of the work that you've done in the North. Maybe just tell people a little bit about some of the communities you've worked in and kind of what you specialized in a little bit.
So I do general psychiatry. So there's a lot of different psychiatric needs everywhere across Canada. Most people who psychiatrists are treating have depression or anxiety, psychosis or bipolar or PTSD. The communities I work in are La Loche, Larange, and the Athabasca Health Authority, which is the authority at the very top of the province. So that has Fond du Lac in it. And yeah. Thank you.
Nobody gets to joke. It's the Athabasca.
And what I found.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's the cutting out my internet.
Yeah, we have a little bit
what
of
I'm finding. Yeah, this is entirely my internet's fault. But what I'm finding is that I'm seeing a lot of PTSD, a lot of trauma that's overlying everything that I'm treating. And it makes diagnoses complicated. It makes engaging with care complicated. It makes motivation for care complicated because it's hard to be motivated or hopeful that things will get better when traumas keep happening. And being from Southwestern Ontario, I don't think I had realized how much trauma and how much lack of resources are going on in Northern Canada. And this has been a horrifying experience that I'm horrified that I spent 30 years of my life unaware that there were people in Canada living this way with this kind of pain that's being inflicted on them.
Yeah. I didn't realize that like PTSD was one of the bigger issues in it. But I guess that goes into like trauma, right? Any type of trauma you can suffer from PTSD, right? I guess people don't just think of that from the get-go. It's just like we think of like depression and anxiety automatically, but I guess that's all encompassing under what you would feel with PTSD, correct?
Yeah, because PTSD symptoms can be low mood, they can be anger, they can be anxiety, they can be drinking, they can be risky behavior. A lot of PTSD doesn't present in the way that we think, oh, look, they're clearly injured by the thing that happened to them. Because it presents in such varied ways. And adequately treating it, having access to good, often actually not good psychiatry, but good psychology, good trauma-focused therapy can be a really important part of helping people stay safe and recover from some of the traumas that they've been through.
Okay. And what are some of those methods? Like, would it be counseling or going out on the land? Like, what are some of the ways that you treat people?
So PTSD, what I do is less fun and less, let's say, less open to the ability to actually engage with some Indigenous knowledge keeping, because mostly, since I'm such a limited resource, I'm there to help people who need access to medication. So sometimes, no matter what we do, no matter how healthy we're living, no matter what therapy we're engaging in, sometimes we need medication added on, and then that becomes my role. But because we have a lack of resources up there, oftentimes I'm also meeting people who don't have something that has to have medication start yet, or they're not ready to consider meds yet. So what I do sometimes is talk to them about what other options they have. And in those cases, it's great when I have someone who can do counseling. So trauma-focused therapy often involves talking through the trauma, helping to reduce some of the panic that happens every time someone thinks about the trauma, and change some of the ways we think about if bad things happen. So a really simplistic version of PTSD is, say, if you cross the street and got hit by a car, you might avoid crossing streets, you might avoid cars. Trauma-focused therapy might say, well, in 32 years of your life, you've only been hit by a car once. How likely is it you're going to be hit by a car again? What can you do to keep yourself safe from that car? And how can we gradually expose you to more cars?
Okay, interesting.
And so that having access to that, because it takes a while is really important. And actually in the North, often it's very hard to get consistent, high quality trauma-focused therapy.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I've come across this a few times with like friends and family that, you know, have mental health issues and then are prescribed medication, and I'm just like automatically like, no, that's, you know, exercise, eat well, do all these things first. But these people, a lot of these people are really, like, healthy, and I'm like so at odds with that a lot that I'm like, but there's a reason, and I understand like there's chemical imbalances in our body, and there's other explanations that we can't see. So
well, I like to think about what you're talking about as incredibly important for mental health. So you should be sleeping regularly, you should be exercising, you should be eating healthy and finding meaning. It's so important to find meaning and purpose and identity in the world. Like, we have to have those things or we can't survive.
Yeah.
If you aren't eating healthy, if you aren't sleeping well, if you aren't engaging in exercise, you're increasing your risk of ill health, and you're probably not helping your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to do that, being able to engage in healthy activity, requires a fair bit of energy and effort. It's really hard to eat healthy and to exercise when you're horribly depressed.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to do that when you have so much trauma that you're afraid to leave your house. And it's hard to do that when you're facing intergenerational trauma and colonialism and don't have access to healthy food, don't have access to safe places to be outside and exercise. So sometimes what we're doing isn't so much treating a person because we think that the medication's going to be better than the diet and exercise. We're treating them with the meds in the hopes that that's going to help them be well enough that they can then do the diet and exercise, build a healthier life. The meds are supposed to help them build the life worth living and the best life possible. But if they take the meds and then can't find a meaning to their life, find a purpose to their life, the meds won't do anything. They're not just magic pills. Yeah. You've got to use that energy and hope and help of the meds to then go on and live your best life possible.
Mm-hmm. So from the work that you do, how often is it that healthcare will reach out to like youth programs or like cultural programs in communities, like all of those different like little things that we do as communities to promote wellness for young people, for our elders, just for community members in general? Like, how big is that a part of a plan for a wellness model for a client for you?
So that is huge at OUTSaskatoon. That's actually down south. It's in Saskatoon. Yeah. One would expect from OUTSaskatoon. But I am so privileged to work there because they're a wonderful community organization. I have Jack Saddleback who works there, and he's the cultural coordinator. I don't think I have his job. Yeah, he's wonderful. And I don't think I have his job title right, but he's lovely. Yeah. And so they have this out on the land camp. And so actually when I'm up in the north and I have LGBT kids who are isolated and don't really know who they are or how to connect with their Indigenous identity and their Two-Spirit identity, I can say, oh, good, Jack, and out on the land camp. Go be part of it. And so it's wonderful and is such a great way to build that sense of meaning and purpose and connection that helps fuel hope and helps fuel them to actually try and get themselves well. Yeah. And then with the rest of OUTSaskatoon, when I have folks who are feeling isolated and sad and don't have the supports they need, I can send them to the community groups there. Okay. I desperately want this in the north. I desperately want to be that connected with the communities in the north. And unfortunately, because I'm only there one day a month, I haven't had the chance to build those connections. Mm-hmm. And I know that it's a hole in my clinic because I have these isolated kids. I have these isolated adults who need a healing community, and I don't have someone to suggest to them. Yeah. It's actually that the disorganization of resources up there, I think, is one of the bigger problems we have, because there are a lot of strengths and there are a lot of very well-meaning people up there. There are even good and very skilled therapists who go up there, but everyone goes up for such short chunks of time that we're not building that community. We're not building the connection, and we're missing out on some really valuable strengths that are up there that I think could make a difference to people's mental health.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've been involved with recently, I don't know if you heard of it, but it was the 155 collective. So that's the Northwest communities put together an incident command center, which was acting in response to the COVID pandemic planning process. So through Treaty 10
Yeah.
tariffs in the Northwest, there was over 28, somewhere around there. All of the communities in the Northwest region kind of came together and said, okay, we're all trying to do the same thing. Let's not recreate the wheel. Let's
Yeah.
figure this out together. So going forward, I think there's so much benefit in having a collective like that, where daily communities are updating on what COVID was like in communities. But for things, we don't treat suicide, we don't treat mental health as like a crisis, which is we are actually in crisis in the North. There's no reason that a few years ago there was 5 little girls in the matter of a week that committed suicide. That should never ever have to happen. That's a crisis, and it's an ongoing thing. And I know the numbers of attempts for suicide, we don't hear those every day, but those far exceed the numbers of COVID in communities. So we need to change our perception on what we see as crisis, I think. So the work you do is just so important. I love it. I appreciate you.
Well, and I love the folks in the community who are trying to build resources so that we can actually do it effectively. Oh,
yeah. So maybe that's a point of contact that you can have, is working with that 155 group to say look, this is what I do. What do you guys have in your communities that I can build off of for this wellness model, right? So
yeah, I'm making myself a note right now.
That's cool. That's exciting. And anybody else, if you have questions or if you have ideas or whatever, put them in the comments. We can see the comments rolling up, which are non-existent. So I'm getting private messages though from people. So put those in the comment section, and we can see them and we can talk about them during this. So I had another question regarding that holistic model. So we have, the cultural components, the community, kinship, all of that, plus the professional medical aspect of it. How heavy would you say Indigenous knowledge and the inclusion of elders and knowledge keepers in the field of mental health is, and how do you see that changing?
Sorry, you cut out. Was that, how's it changing?
Yeah. How do you see it? Do you see it improving?
I think it varies. I'm not sure that I'm seeing it improving in the clinics that I'm at yet. And that's not to say anything against the clinics, just the way I'm there, because I'm only up there once a month. When I run into someone who's connected to community, who has elders that they have as supports, who goes to sweats, who goes to powwows, who is engaged in those traditional things, it's actually quite powerful to work with that around their mental health. It usually means that I'm actually being able to focus more on the very small biological part. That's why I'm getting sent in, instead of this overarching social connection part, because they have a feeling of hope and community. They have a feeling of connection with history and meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
The folks who can't connect with elders are often presenting quite lost. And there's only so much I can do with a medicine when they're so adrift.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm
it
sorry.
It would be very lovely to have an...
Sorry, go ahead.
I can hear you. Oh,
I was just checking to see if there were comments, but no comments yet. Come on, people.
Sorry.
Engage.
Engage with me, yell at me, tell me you hate me. I'll respond. The elders who are out there and who are helping people connect with their community are, I think, incredibly valuable resources, and I would very much like them to be part of my clinic. I think especially because oftentimes there is this pushback against the over-medicalization that's happened. People have been doped up because that, it basically as a way of trying to treat all of the psychosocial problems. They've ended up on way too many drugs just to keep them safe, but without helping some of the meaning and purpose and reason to live, because the people who've treated them don't have access to a way to give them a reason to live. And so then there's this pushback against folks who seem to have been zombied by their meds. I think most of us, certainly me, we're not trying to make people zombies. We're trying to help people live the best life possible. And sometimes that means keeping them alive for a little bit, and maybe they're a little sedated while they're alive. But with the goal of getting them back to community, getting them alive, getting them healthy, happy, and engaged with life. Because there's this pushback against the meds, I think that a lot of my job is actually building trust again and helping the community know that my goal isn't to make people zombies, and helping the folks who I'm treating know that they should be safe here, that they can tell me symptoms and I'm not going to immediately respond by doping them up. I'm not going to try and treat them against their will. I'm going to do my best to work with them and help them become who they want to be. And if we could build that trust with everyone in the community so that everyone was aware of what psychiatry did and aware of the folks to bring to psychiatry and aware of the folks to suggest that actually there's different ways of treatment. There's meaning making, there's connection with community and history. It would be very helpful. I would like to have the community as part of my team to work with.
Have you ever done, or like through the health region done like a community engagement process where you sit down with different demographics and say, like, look, this is kind of the function that we have, and how do you see it rolling out, and how do we best serve you? Have you done those sessions?
Yeah, we've done it in La Loche. When I first went up, I had the advantage of getting to go not formally through the health region, but informally. The very first time I went up to La Loche, it was actually just to meet people in the community and talk with people, and it was very good to get to hear the anger and distress that was going on in the community with kind of what treatment and resources had been like in the past. But I think we're talking about a systemic issue. For the rest of the communities, I just showed up and had a clinic booked without a chance to actually meet and talk to the community. I think it's part of the Western model of healthcare. It's this idea that I am the medical expert. I can just show up somewhere and my meds will be helpful regardless of whether I built the community. I like to think that over the 4 years that I've been working up there, I'm building ties and I'm getting to know people, and I'm having a chance to sometimes reach out to more, but I'm still not as connected as I'd like to be. This, I think, is maybe the closest I'm getting to community engagement and a chance to hear what people need.
Discussions, like I'm very passionate about mental health. Like in university, I actually studied psychology, and this was some of the work that I wanted to do, and that's kind of changed over the years. I've changed from like being on the other side of it to going to the proactive part where I'm like, well, I want to do like sports programs and youth programs and help with the wellness part as opposed to like the treatment portion of it. So that's how my mind has kind of changed with things. But I want to go back to one thing that you made me think of is like, so trauma. How much does like the medical model include generational trauma and treating patients as like one of the root causes of what's going on? And how do you gauge that? Like, I just, I look back on some of the things that I find I have trouble with in my own life. And I'm like, I had this identity thing for a very long time where I just felt like angry and like ripped off that I couldn't speak and I still can't. And my mindset has kind of changed on it, but I can't speak my language, right? And that is generational trauma that was taken away. And so we have this reality where young people my age, nobody can speak their language, right? But I'm on the side where it's like, no excuses. I have no excuse. My language still exists. I'm making an excuse for myself now. So I just have to get out and do it, kind of thing. But how do you work with generational trauma?
So there's two different approaches, I'm going to say. And this is, again, oversimplification, but I'm going to say it breaks down to two different approaches for me. Okay. One is actually family therapy. Can you do family therapy? I can't. I don't have enough time to do it because you can't do family therapy once a month or once every 4 months with someone. It's not going to work. But if you can do family therapy and actually heal that family, you can heal some of the intergenerational trauma. Now, that's not going to teach someone language, but it might help the relationships that were hurt by this, or it might help the child understand why the parent didn't teach the language and the trauma that was going on there. The other way of dealing with it isn't so much to treat the trauma, but recognize the trauma. So if I had no knowledge of Indigenous history and the intergenerational trauma and colonialism that's gone on, and I had an angry kid in front of me who was pissed off every time someone brought up Indigenous culture to them, I could easily just focus on the anger and say, okay, well, we've got to medicate you that anger away. On the other hand, recognizing some trauma and that their family is quite traumatized, and maybe they're a youth who has not ever had a chance to engage with their culture, then I might actually be able to sit with them in mourning for that. So we can sit together and we can recognize this anger is actually about sadness, and we can validate that sadness. Now, it's not going to cure everything. There's still going to be an angry youngster, and they're still going to need some supports in place. We might have to go to medication. But recognizing it and recognizing that this is part of a systemic issue, that this isn't a personal failing, this is actually a social failing, that this happened to their community, can be quite powerful because it takes some of the shame and some of the personal stigma away from it.
Okay. So on that other side, so working with the client, there's that one-on-one piece, but how does and maybe this is like a big question, but how does the medical field address this at like a federal and provincial level to say, like, look, these are huge issues that we have in communities, and like our work supports the need to see more culture, more language, more being on the land. It's proven that this is a method of therapy for people. How is that done?
That, I think, is usually done in our advocacy role. So that's not necessarily in clinic. I am a rare doctor who went into medicine with a practical sociology degree with community development. A lot of doctors go in with like bioscience as their undergrad. And so we're a lot of us are actually mostly focused on that one-to-one microsphere human.
Yeah.
I think we count on public health doctors. We count on our sociologists, on our PhD colleagues, on community advocates to make some of these bigger community level arguments and to share their wisdom and their expertise on these areas, because we're experts on dopamine systems, not on community systems most of the time. We do have power, though, as doctors, and so many of us try and use that power, that social capital, to get behind and support the sociologists, the PhDs, the experts in community health, and to try and say, yes, we're seeing what this sociologist is seeing. The sociologist is the expert. They have all the statistics on it. The community member is the expert. They're living the experience, but we're also seeing it as doctors, and we have this clout, so we'll support you. There are groups networks of doctors working in medicine around the idea of upstream health and preventative health care, but it's usually, again, outside of their clinics. In the clinic, they might be recognizing what they're seeing with their patients, but outside of the clinic, they're doing the advocacy for social change.
Interesting. I like, and this is like totally, I'm not picking any sides right now, but like, I love Dr. Miley, and I think it's incredible that we have like an experienced medical professional going into politics to be able to fight for these things. And he has, I think I met him when I was like 12 years old, and he's been in our community for years, you know, like people that actually know the issues of Northerners and Indigenous people. Like that's what we need more of, right? Like, it's just, Saskatchewan is such an interesting place. Like we have one of the highest populations of Indigenous people in Canada. And then we have the highest incarceration rates for young people for Indigenous. Okay. How does the rates go? So in Saskatchewan, 96% of incarcerated girls are Indigenous, and we only make up 15% of the population. And it's 92 or 94% for boys. So we make up maybe at 20% of the provincial population, but we make up almost 100% of the prison systems for young people. Like that's disturbing. And Canada-wide, I think we're about 50%. Like,
and so much of that is, well, I mean, a huge chunk of that is racism. It's the over-policing of the Indigenous communities, and it's bullshit.
Yeah.
All of it's bullshit. But the other part is untreated trauma. These are kids who also have been dealing with intergenerational trauma, who their cortisol systems are upregulated. They're having trouble functioning in society because they're in a constant state of distress. And this should be treated. We need more funding for child psychiatry. We need more funding for family support so that kids can actually have the things they need to regulate themselves. Like, and it's just we're like failing these kids when we're not making sure.
Yeah, it just like, I used to be the consultant for the Q8 Niathe region for cognitive disabilities. And one of the things that I found was like, I'd have this huge caseload of clients and people in the queue, in the waiting list, that like didn't even have assessments and would have to wait 2 years. And then, you know, I just think about all of that, and like how many of those kids that are incarcerated like have mental health issues or other like cognitive disorders that are, you know, causing that behavior. It's not like so awful.
How many of them are getting taken advantage of by other people out there on the street who recognize this vulnerable kid who can be convinced to go break into the car because they don't think differently about it, because they're like, okay, this guy's my buddy, he's telling me to do it.
Yeah.
Horrible.
I have
the state of care for youth is infuriating.
Yep, definitely. I have a statement from my friend TJ Warren. This guy's an incredible chicken dancer. And we actually, a few years ago, I was working in Larange at a college, and TJ came up as a dancer. We hosted an event called Vibrant Roots. So we did kind of the let's not talk about suicide, but address suicide. So it was in response to a suicide crisis that had happened, and we just wanted to focus on all of the positive strength building that whole bit. And so we had incredible people like TJ, who he's originally from down south, but is shacked up north in well, not up north, but in Saskatchewan with his beautiful family. But TJ was able to come up and show the dances and actually explain a lot about culture and why, you know, having that connection and that identity is so important. TJ says we need continuity. The North gets so many well-intentioned people, but aren't supported in the work they do. We need more supports and funding for our relatives in the North. I agree. very much so. And I think that's kind of what this whole discussion is about, right? Like, you only get to come up here a few days a week, or
it's a month. Yeah. And I think that's where I'm getting very frustrated every time we have these crises and they send people up, because they're lovely people. When they decide to send me up, all of us want to do good things, but we're not there long enough to actually engage with the strength that's in the community. Or if we're there long enough for a month, for 3 months, and then the contract's ended and then we're gone. I had youth tell me in La Loche that they were sick of going to therapy because it was a new therapist every single time, and they had to tell their trauma all over again. And there's some wonderful youth therapists up there right now, but it was heartbreaking, and it was really valid. This is not a useful way to provide any of this care to anyone.
Yeah. Well, and it's so counterproductive, because I had a friend who just finished the mental health program at Northlands College. One of my really good friends, Shaylin Bouvier, give you a shout out, but she's like, oh my God, I love her. She's just speaking to me right now because she just finished this program. And that's one of her fears, is like, will people trust me? Like, one, we have a thing where, sometimes there's like the lateral violence of like not trusting your own kin, your own community, right? And I see that, like, I get it. Like, sometimes it's a little awkward, like, I grew up with her, I know her, so I don't want to go and sit and tell her all my problems. I'd rather do that with a stranger. But then it's also like, how do you even, start to build that trust and understanding? What kind of advice would you give to new grads and people fresh in the realm of mental health on that front?
I wish I'd thought about advice earlier. The first one, the big one, stick with it. Yeah. So it's going to take time to build the trust. You will feel burnt out within that first month, the first 3 months. You will feel like you cannot do it anymore because you're so sick of how much pain you're seeing and how little trust you have. Yeah. The longer you stay, the more people will trust you, and the healthier you will see them get. But mental health is not a fast game. It's a slow game, and same with trust. Yeah. So it took me a year, 2 years before I started having enough people actually turning out at my La Loche clinics to feel like it was worthwhile going up. Yeah. And I mean, I kept going up even though it took a while, because I knew it was going to take a while. Who's going to trust me? I look like I'm 12 and I'm a white girl. You got to actually like build that trust and have people believe that I can be helpful. The other one, I think, is recognize you're going to see a lot of trauma, and people need a place to put their trauma, and it's too painful for them to carry it. So they're going to put a lot of that trauma onto you. Yeah. And if they're putting it onto you, it's going to hurt. So it's okay that you're going to, Barb Flett just commented that it's not that we don't trust our own people, it's we don't trust, it's colonization. And Barb, I 100% agree with you. People don't trust people because they've been traumatized, because they've been hurt, and they've been hurt by asshat white people. I find it incredibly ironic that Brescia is a Catholic college, and so they've sent another Catholic woman up there. I mean, I'm not Catholic, but I got trained by a bunch of Catholics. I'm doing my best to undo some of that asshattery that happened.
I love that. It's so real.
It's
I really appreciate this. I'm like, yes, girl, go. It's interesting. Like, it's such a soft topic though, hey? And you look at it from like a religious perspective, but also just like colonization perspective, that like we have to walk this fine line of like, we can't necessarily talk that it's like, oh, the church is bad, there's culture. I mean, religion is so strong in northern Saskatchewan. It is so strong. Like, I remember traveling to communities and I'd ask questions and like, so what happened before 1950, to elders, and they're like, oh, nothing. And I'm like, okay, so just churches were built and that was that. Hey, like, it's just such a, and I grew up that way, right? I grew up And it's funny, like that's my mom that commented that's colonization. So thanks, Mama.
Your mom is very clever.
Yeah, I watched this podcast. It was Oprah's podcast, which I'm obsessed with. But she was podcasting with a nun, a sister. And Sister Joan Chiseter, I think is her name. And it's incredible. You should watch it. It's really cool. And she talks about how like Christianity and like that whole realm there's like a patriarchy that exists, and that's not what religion is about. That's not what your connection to God and spirituality and that whole bit is about. It's about, like, you know, your connection to God and the land and everything around you and people and yourself. But it's turned into this thing where it's used as a tool for power, right? So, but how do we bring that to community, you know? Like,
so there is despite the fact that Brescia was a Catholic college, it was a wonderful feminist college.
Yeah.
And there I had this wonderful professor who taught liberation theology. And liberation theology is all about what would Jesus do? If he were in this world right now, what would Jesus do? And Jesus would say, fuck all of you guys. Sorry about swearing on your podcast.
It's okay.
He would go there and he would free the children in cages. He would support the sex workers. He would come up and demand care for the North.
Yeah.
He would not allow any of this happening because he was a man. He was a person who was about helping the oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
And blessed were the poor, for they shall inherit the earth. These are powerful messages that are in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And while I'm not Christian, having done an undergraduate in religious studies, I saw the beautiful value for life and value for the sanctity of humans,
mm-hmm.
and our job to help support each other and to help each other become stronger. I loved the message that it was in community that the Holy Spirit came. And wherever my followers are gathering, that is where I am, is a beautiful message. I didn't actually expect to be as furious as I was when I saw the picture of Trump holding a Bible in front of a church and saw that he had tear gassed medics to try and move them in front of it. But this is a bastardization of everything that is there in spirituality as a whole, in Christianity specifically. Mm-hmm. These are incredibly powerful things. And I think because they're so powerful, they've been abused by people who want power, but they're also a huge source of meaning, of grounding, of connection, of helping us understand how to exist in the world when it can often be really hard. And that's one of the reasons why I think that spirituality is so important. I don't always bring it up with people when I'm talking to them because I think it's also quite personal. And so I don't want people to feel like they have to talk about it if they don't want to. But it is an incredibly powerful thing. And I think we can find this idea of kindness and the sanctity of humanity across religions. I don't think there's a religion that doesn't have it. I just think that representatives of religions have not often embraced that themselves.
Yeah. I think, like, for myself, growing up, I grew up going to church. I was an altar girl for a while. Used to read at church, make my mama proud, you know? And as I got older, like, I literally have a dinosaur on my arm in, like, evolution exists. Like, come on. And so I was at odds with it for a long time. And then, but I would find myself, like, when I was really scared or, like, you know, just in dire straits, like, so sad, and I'd pray and I'd be like, Jesus or whatever, you know, like, was just my reaction. It made me feel better. And I'm like, okay, this can't be so bad. Like, there are the, like, things that tell you not to kill people and, like, don't sleep with your neighbor's wife and all that shit. So, like, there is some, like, logic in the way that goes, but also They have very much changed over the years, and now my parents are like, you're a pagan. It's funny, but like now I go to ceremony and I feel so connected to the earth and to the creator, and that's who I pray to, and I pray to my cookums and my mushums, and and it's just like it was kind of like being okay with admitting that to myself and to my family was like a really, really tough piece. And I don't know what it's like for other young people in the North, but I imagine maybe it's similar. Yeah, it's an interesting thing, the power of religion.
I've always thought that religion, when you find the right religion or spirituality for you, it feels like coming home. Mm-hmm. It feels like you have just come to the place where you're loved, you're accepted, where everything feels right.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that everything that everyone says in the religion feels right, because we can't control what other people do or how they interpret religion. But for us, in that quiet place inside of ourselves, it feels like coming home. Mm-hmm. And it's really important that we have access to that. Mm-hmm. I think the fear and distrust some folks have in the face of some of their traditional knowledge is a horrifying leftover from colonization. No one should feel like they're doing something wrong by connecting with their religion.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even on the other side of that, people are like almost feeling guilty for being Christian or Catholic or whatever because of what the church has done to people, what residential schools, the impact that has had. It's like we have to reconcile those differences like within ourselves, right? And then make sense of it and what it actually means to us, taking all of that out and relearning.
We humans are complicated beasts, and the world is a difficult place. That's one of the reasons why I don't think I will ever be bored by my job. But it's also, I think, one of the reasons why we need like religion and spirituality. And I have a number of atheist friends, and humanism and the idea that the world around us, not imbued with the divinity that paganism imbues it with, but with just the meaning and value of scientific fact. Mm-hmm. All of this can be really important for giving us a safe place in what can be a very challenging world.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. Look, I'm using my lingo from Tim Ferriss. My dad will appreciate that. Dad will appreciate that. So how have you found, like, before coming to the North, what was your perception? And then like during your time spent in the North, what was your perception? And like things have just changed so dramatically. I know, like on a personal level, my own perspective, what is important, where I want to be, who I want to spend my time with has definitely like dramatically changed since, we have to stay home. We have to like have time to think about these things. Oh no, stop calling me. So from your perspective, like how has that changed for you? So before you came to the North, during your time working here, and since COVID, kind of how is that?
Well, COVID has definitely emphasized the fact that I miss leaving my house. And I mean that less for going grocery shopping and more for getting to my clinics. I miss the chance to be in community. I miss the chance to sit down and have a ridiculous conversation with Jack Saddleback at lunch while I'm not doing my paperwork for OUTSaskatoon's clinic. And I miss getting to go up to the North and getting to see the communities and be part. I was hoping that I was going to get to go to a sweat or a powwow this summer in L'Orange. I was going to try and organize it so that I could go be part of that, and now it's not happening. One of the things I've actually really enjoyed is the government is now supporting us doing virtual care. So I can actually call people to do initial assessments, and it's been wonderful. I've caught so many people in the car and they've been like, oh yeah, no, we're just driving to like PA. And I've been like, okay, well, can I do your initial assessment now? Is it okay now? And they're like, yeah, sure. And so then, these are people who would never have gotten into clinic because it just didn't fit into their life, having to go to the clinic. But now I can see them. Now I can talk to them and actually make a plan, and we can follow up faster. So it's been wonderful. And I think it's really emphasized how much I love doing this. I love being able to provide this care to people. And because I've been missing the community, and so I haven't gotten to be there, when I'm connecting with my patients again by phone, it's like I'm going back to my community. I feel like I'm part of it again and talking to them, and it's filled me with so much joy. So much, as a psychiatrist, you spend too much time evaluating yourself. But so much of what drove me to do Northern Care was this desire to be part of communities, to actually be a needed, necessary component. And I'm actually realizing how much I'm getting that wonderful privilege with these follow-ups. And I mean, I'm missing being there in person, but I'm getting to be there by phone, and I'm still there. I'm still needed. I'm still a part of it, even though it's virtually, and it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's really cool to see too, like, especially considering the lack of resources that we have, like going back to that topic of like, you wish you had the time and the resources and the people and the connections to include culture and elders and community programs into your model, but like, it's just the resource, the manpower, the resources are not there. So it's just like, it's really cool to see how technology is just improving things for people. I remember my cookum used to have to like go to Saskatoon every few weeks, and there was like doctors that wouldn't do calls, they wouldn't do telehealth, and they're like, no, you have to, that means we'll have to go to this other building in Saskatoon, and we won't do that for the call. And I'm like, you're gonna make a freaking 70-year-old woman drive 5 hours with a freaking bag in her stomach that is painful for a 10-minute meeting because you don't want to drive 15 minutes across the damn city? Like, so this kind of stuff has forced that and shown like how much more productive this is and efficient it is. It does take away from the human aspect, but
I mean, we find ways around that. Like, it's not that I'll never go back to the north again. It's just that I can now add this. So the folks who it doesn't work to come see me in the north, I can actually call from Saskatoon.
Yeah.
I actually think if the government doesn't extend the support for virtual care after the end of COVID, if COVID ever ends, but if they don't, it's like racist. It's literally decreasing quality of care specifically to rural and remote folks, and most of those folks are Indigenous, and this is a step they need to do as part of reconciliation to actually make sure that this care is as accessible and reasonable. And if they don't do it, it's going to be mostly Indigenous folks who are suffering from it.
Yeah.
Now, they have to keep funding in place for flying to the north too, because that's part of community building. But
yeah, and then it's like, if they don't continue that, that's awful. But what should actually be done is more mental health support, more you in the world up here. Like, it's like, come on, like, this is like unveiling shit that people weren't paying attention to before at such a greater level. And it's like, in times of crisis and like really scary times like this, it's like the silver lining, right? Like, it's awful and it's terrible, but it does have good in the sense that these kind of things come out and we have to talk about them now. Like, sorry, Scott Moe and like federal government, you have to actually pay attention to people up here. We are a big chunk of your damn province. Like,
yeah. You can't pretend that the province is Saskatoon and Regina.
Yep. I've got another message here. It's going to block our whole faces. This is my cousin Mel. So hi, cousin Jordan. I learned a lot from Cookum Irene. That's our Cookum. She knew I was completing my social work degree, and 10 years ago when I completed it, she told me to come home to help our youth. I wasn't ready. I needed experience, but 10 years of working at the Ministry of Social Services and now working on a reserve for a First Nations Health Center as Jordan's principal advocate. I'm still working as part of the mental health team since I am now also approved as mental health therapist through NIHB. I wonder if I can see the rest of the message somehow. Let's see. The loaded one, Mel. Sorry. That's awesome. That's so cool. And I think that's another aspect we need, right? Is like, I love what you do, but like having people from our own communities to be able to be trained and do this work, like that's really important too, I think.
If someday a bunch of Indigenous doctors come up and are like, we're going to do this, I'll be like, yes, go to the north, take over. I'll just go cottage up there. It'll be great. One of the things that I think I've loved has been working at OUTSaskatoon, because I'm gay. This is the gay community center. And when I have someone who comes in and is like, yeah, my family says they're supportive, but they keep like pushing these small things and introducing me to dudes, and it's like, there's all this stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I
understand, because I've been through the same thing. And it's so easy. There's a common language, there's a similar experience, and when there's not, there's at least more in common than when I'm from an entirely different group. And if we can get more Indigenous doctors, more Northern doctors who are trained and supported well to go up to the North, then I would love for that to happen. And I would love to help support those folks myself. What we have to make sure we do, though, is we have to make sure that it is well supported, because oftentimes folks from marginalized communities end up working in marginalized communities because they have that passion to advocate, and then end up making significantly less money than the folks who aren't working in those marginalized communities. So I don't want the burden to be on a bunch of Northern graduates to pay all of the cost of med school and then go back and make, a third of what the folks who stayed in Saskatoon are making. That's not the case right now, but I don't want it to be the case in the future. I can actually stack how much money I make in my clinics based on who I'm caring for, and the clinic that I make the least money is OUTSaskatoon's, which not because of OUTSaskatoon, they don't pay me, it's the government that pays me, but it's the clinic that I bill the least. And I do it because I love it, because they're my people, and because I feel a pressure to care for my people. But no one should be paid less because they're a marginalized person caring for their marginalized community. That's how we reinforce this marginalization. That's how we make sure that marginalized groups stay marginalized.
Exactly. And it's interesting to see like other countries, the way that their health model works. Like I just absolutely am in awe of the work that like New Zealand does, for example, like with Maori people.
Yes, it's amazing.
You don't need to have an undergrad degree. You can go right into a law program, because we need more Maori Indigenous lawyers. Like, why don't we have, mental health programs that are paid for Indigenous youth? Because that's who can help Indigenous youth. Indigenous youth, they can relate. They have lived experience. Like, that's why I actually had lived with Shannon. She took the mental health program at Northlands while I was working at Northlands. And man, I just like, it's so important, like what she's going through in school and like the life that this woman has lived. Like, I'm always just like, man, the amount of people and like the impact that she's gonna have. Like, she's lost her brother and her mom more recently, and like, and sorry, Shay, for telling your story, but I just think it's so incredibly beautiful. And that's the power of having our own people in these positions. It's like, you can actually say you lived through that and you can help people that are losing family members to this stuff. Like, so very cool. Good job, my friend. Your mama would be very proud of you.
I think that we have a lot of space to go to make sure that we actually provide care that's not reinforcement of colonialism. And no matter how hard I try, I know that part of my presence, because it's coming from the Western model, I'm an outsider. I'm only there, one day a month. Part of my presence inevitably reinforces colonialism. The best I can do to disrupt it is done, but I'm still learning, and I'm always learning. I'm always going through that process of trying to be anti-colonialist and anti-racist. But the strength and resilience of these youth who I see that are coming up, who are going to help change the world, I'm hopeful that I won't be needed soon.
Mm-hmm. Okay, last question. Then
There's a child and dog who might come bug us.
Okay, cool. I love children and dogs.
They might not. Yeah.
So just like kind of furthering that, I guess. I think some of the things that I've been thinking about lately, like, so I was in the bush all the past like few weeks. I went up to Kaniasik Culture Camp, which is in Minnesota. And the timing was just like pretty incredible. Like, we ended up hitting 4 ceremonies, 3 of which I had never attended. So it was just like, it was beautiful. It was magic. And the community was so welcoming. Like, even amidst like everything happening with COVID, like, people like tried to stay safe, but we were able to like heal in that way, and so I was kind of under a rock for the past like week and a half. And then I came back and, looking through social media and watching the news, I was just like, oh my God, mind-blowing. Like, I remember walking around Saskatoon after the Colton Boushie situation had happened and we lost that young man. And I just remember feeling like, man, I've never felt more brown. Like, I feel like I could just feel this air that people are looking at me with like hate or disgust or like, like indifference. And I was just like, oh, I just was such an ugly feeling. And like looking through this, we see that now. And like my question about that, like I went to bed pretty sad about it, trying to like, okay, stay informed and like learn what you can and try to help the issue from like what capacity and what little I can do. But also like staying healthy, like I internalize a lot of that stuff. I'm a pretty sensitive person. So like, what kind of advice would you give to young people or people in general during this time that are like, we want to be informed. It's important to be in the know and understand what's happening and, watch the news and understand it. But at the same time, it's also important to check out of that and say, okay, like I need my mental health. I need to be, positive and looking forward to the future and seeing the good in this. Like, what advice do you have for that, like, fine line? I know that's a loaded question, but.
No, this is a wonderful question, and it's a common one in my clinic because I have, again, the privilege of getting to work with a lot of radical people who are trying to change the world too.
Cool.
The news is a capitalist system. The news is trying to make money. And so they are presenting the most inflammatory, the most click-worthy, the most horrible stuff that they can possibly present to you. They are not in the business of trying to keep you informed so that you can be a radical world changer. I'm not saying individual reporters are, but the news as a whole system is a money-making venture. Find one news source, find something that you trust, use it, because you need to stay informed. Find an amount of time that will work for you to catch up on things. And honestly, it won't take more than, 10 to 15 minutes to catch up on the news every day. Schedule that time in, and schedule it in for time not right before you go to bed. Schedule it in the morning, at lunch, sometime that works for you. The rest of the day is devoted to either making practical changes or taking care of yourself. And that could involve working, it could involve writing letters, it could involve spending time with friends and family from an appropriate 2-meter distance.
Yeah.
If you don't take care of yourself, then the oppressors win. The system wins if you don't take care of yourself. And it actually wants you to get overwhelmed. It wants you to be overloaded and stressed out and spend all of your time worrying. It doesn't want you to be rested and have energy and make change.
Yeah.
But worry isn't helpful. Rewatching the same stuff over and over again isn't helpful. If you know 5 minutes after something horrible has happened that it happened versus 24 hours after it's happened, not going to make a huge difference. You are still going to have the same ability to change the world and the same ability to take action if you take action 24 hours later.
Yeah.
But you will have way more internal fortitude, internal strength, internal resilience if you can devote the time to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of us fall into the trap of thinking that being informed or worrying is actually helpful, and it's not in and of itself. What's helpful is the actions we take, the change we make, the rallies we go to, the letters we write, the friends and family we support. So we need to save our energy to do that and not waste our energy just feeding into the capitalist news machine.
Yeah. Thank you. I like that. And then
I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that was very helpful. I think we can close with maybe just for people that are, I know for myself, I was going through a really, really, like, one of the roughest times in my life a year or so ago. And I was in this, like, I don't want to have to access mental health support. I don't want to have to do that. Like, all of these things going through my head. But then I did, and it helped tremendously. But what are some of the common things that you see on that front in terms of, like, people being afraid to do that? And especially, like, in small communities, like, I know when I worked in La Crosse, I was like, okay, it was that thing of, like, I don't want people to know that I have problems, so I want to access support from someone outside of the community, which is stupid because that support is right there. And I kind of feel that better now. But, with those things in mind, like, what's some advice that you have for people seeking help?
There are a lot of very useful internet resources. So, I would recommend reaching out to the mental health services in your community, see what they have available, see if they're a good fit, because sometimes people are good fits that you wouldn't expect to be a good fit for you for counseling. They might actually have some specific recommendations too for things that might be helpful. They might know some resources to refer you to that are closer to the community, but not quite as close. Yeah. But if you just want to Google, if you don't want to talk to anyone in your community, then Anxiety BC or Anxiety Canada has great resources and has a lot of talks and pages and work pages that you can work through on your own to deal with anxiety.
Okay.
There's also Online Therapy Unit, which does cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety or depression. It's free. You can sign yourself up for it, and it's an online module that you can work through. There are a lot of books out there that I love. The two that I recommend all the time to people is Mind Over Mood, which is a cognitive behavioral therapy book, and Dialectical Behavioral Therapy Workbook, which are both really helpful books. There's endless amounts of resources available for online mental health care. Sometimes you just need that face-to-face connection, though. Sometimes you need someone to see you, see all of the stuff you're suffering through, and let you know that it's okay, that it's not something to be ashamed of. Hope Desjardins says there's no shame in seeing someone, and she's right. There's not. All of us sometimes need someone to support us, to point out the cognitive mistakes that we're making, the thought mistakes we're making. It's kind of similar to a high-level athlete who still needs a coach. The coach can't necessarily do the things that high-level athlete can do, but they can recognize where the high-level athlete doesn't quite have the right form. Sometimes we all need a coach. We just need a therapist to be there to say, hey, I see that your layup's kind of off. You're beating yourself up before bed. Why are you doing that? Stop it. Do something nice right before bed. That'll help the form, and your layup will be way better. So these therapists are your coaches. They're not going to live your life for you, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with you or what you're doing. You just need a coach.
Yeah. I love that. I love that analogy. One, because I'm a coach. Two, because I love analogies, and that makes sense, you know? Like I love that it's like it's weird how we find like more understanding in like physical explanations, where when it comes to your mind, it's like this spooky thing that we don't understand. But I appreciate that. Okay, well,
I'll break out my favorite analogy. Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Can I steal a little bit more of your time? My favorite analogy to explain the different components of mental health. So your therapist is your coach. You, the person who's getting the treatment, are the athlete. I'm the orthopedic doctor who's putting a cast on your broken leg. So if you have a broken leg and you go to a coach, you can do everything they tell you to do, and it's still going to hurt like hell, and it's not going to get better. You're going to injure yourself more. If well-meaning people are telling you, no, just go run more, they're mistaken. They're wrong. You do it as hard as you can, it still hurts. You go see the orthopedic doctor, and maybe you need a cast for a little while. That's what my medication is supposed to do. I'm going to cast you for a bit, and then I'm going to hopefully be able to pass you off to some very wise coaches who will help you get back into form, get back to living your life. But sometimes you just need a cast, and then you come to me.
Okay. I like that analogy. I really, really appreciate that. So, thank you. Like, even for myself, like I've just, I have trouble saying like, okay, medication is the way to go. But I appreciate, your professional opinion on that, and the inclusion of everything else that supports it all. I think it is a matter of trust and understanding. So hopefully this has given more people a little bit of clarity. I know it's helped me for sure. Hopefully it's given people a little bit more clarity, given more trust in the work that you do, and others that do the same work. So thank you for that. That's very cool. And seek help, I guess. So any
lovely to get to talk to you too. Thank you.
Oh yeah, it was so good to meet you. I'm stoked. So we're gonna have to do this again, because I know that there's so much more we have to talk about. And I love the real and openness of how this went. So thanks. Is there anything else you want to add before we kind of wrap up?
No, I've had a wonderful talk. I think I've gotten to share all the things that I was passionate about sharing about tonight.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Dungavell. Okay, I got it. Well, thanks again.
Awesome.
Tell your
Thank
family
you.
to say hello, and have a good evening.
I will. Yes, you too.
All right.
I have no idea how to leave.
There you go. Okay, thanks everybody for watching. If you do have questions, like people that didn't get to watch this live, if you have questions, put them in the comment section and they'll be there. I can share them with her via email or whatever, and hopefully get some answers for you. But thanks for sticking through it. That was 1 hour and 15. It's a long discussion, but such an important topic. And the more questions that come out of this give us another opportunity to chat with other health professionals, elders, other young people in our communities that are working in this field. The discussion does not end here, because mental health doesn't magically just go away if we acknowledge it. We have to continuously act. So Thanks again. Love you guys. And I'm looking forward to the next podcast. There's a few really cool ones coming up. So yeah, stay tuned. See ya.